Hey guys, welcome to Monday Night Live. I'm sure we're gonna have a couple more people hopping on. I know there's like 6 or 7 of you guys I just let into the meeting. I want to make sure we start right away. I do have all of you guys muted for this first 15 to 20 minute segment. We've got Mori with us to talk about negotiations. So we were lucky enough to like squeeze her in between calls and traveling, and we were able to get her in to hop on tonight. You'll notice Cody's not here tonight. She had a family emergency that she's taking care of. I think everything will be fine, but she needed to spend the next couple days working on some stuff. So, real quick, I'm just going to give a quick intro to Maury, and we're going to jump right in because I want to make sure we get as much out of the time with her as we can. So, Maury, for the last 15 years, I think I have this right, served on the faculty and is serving on the faculty for legal studies and business ethics with the department at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. She teaches negotiation and dispute resolution at the undergraduate, graduate, and executive levels, and then has been repeatedly rewarded for and a 6-time recipient for rewards for excellence in teaching. In addition to that, she also teaches for Goldman Sachs, 10,000 small business programs in select cities, which we were just talking about throughout the entire United States. And then she also serves as a cross-sector consultant in areas of negotiation, diversity and inclusion, and sports business for a huge client base that includes major sports leagues, Fortune 100 companies, universities, and professional associations. So needless to say, definitely has the background to be able to discuss with us some things that might be useful for you in your negotiating skills. And so I'm excited to hear from you tonight, Maury. She also just launched her first book in March, which is exciting. So as an author, I know what the pain of that is. And so it's called How to Harness the Power of Connection to Negotiate Fearlessly. Sorry, it's Bring Yourself, How to Harness the Power of Connection to Negotiate Fearlessly. So I'm going to let you sort of take this where you want it for the next 15, 20 minutes. I don't want to over direct this, but I do think what would be cool is I know that you do some teaching on some really cool stuff around asking questions in negotiation. And I think there's a lot of like misnomers people have in their head going into negotiation. So I think a cool place to jump off, and then we'll just sort of conversation style take it where it goes. But what are some of those misconceptions and mistakes that you see people making, and sort of how could we correct them pretty quickly?
So happy to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Missing Cody, but hopefully we'll do this again at some point.
Love
Hi
to.
everyone. Excited to be here. As Ryan just pointed out, I did launch my first book, except I did it right at the front end of the pandemic. So what I can teach you is don't ever launch a book in the front end of a pandemic, because it definitely does not go among the best times to launch a book or anything else. There was nobody cared about negotiation books at that point. It was all about where to find your next roll of toilet paper or whatever it was. So it's been a challenge in that regard. But I feel like the reason why I did this book was to start a whole different conversation around negotiations. And every book that I had read, and there's some phenomenal negotiation books out there that are really structured, very prescriptive as to, all the different fundamentals once you put in place, that you can be very successful as a negotiator, and things like preparation and really about what kinds of things to prepare for and setting goals and all that. So I thought, I can't really add anything to that particular conversation, right? It's a great place. I'll weave it into the story, but really what I wanted to do was tell stories. And this book is all about sort of my life, lots of stories about the entrepreneurs and students that I've worked with. And so it's really sort of how to negotiate through the eyes and experiences of all these different individuals. And the reason I did that was because my first goal was to sort of kind of eliminate these myths that a lot of people have around negotiations, right? That one of the first things is that people think that great negotiators are born, right? This is a skill that you're born with, which is not true at all. The last time I checked, there's no negotiation gene that any of us were born with. And it's a skill like, any other great business skill that we learn, and we only get better at. It's like working a muscle, right? So emotional intelligence is the same thing. If you don't think that you have a great deal of emotional intelligence, you learn, right? And you practice, and you practice it some more until you feel like you're so adept at it that it's very comfortable, right? Negotiation, same thing. And so that was one of the first things. So I thought, if I tell the stories of all these great negotiation experiences that people have had, and they're all so different from one another, then we can sort of address this notion of, great negotiators come in only one form, and that in my mind anybody can be a great negotiator, right? So there was that, right? And I wanted this to be a more empowering conversation. I wanted people to feel like, that's why it's called Bring Yourself, that anybody can be a great negotiator, that it's really not about, whether you're more competitive or whether you're more accommodating. It's about being prepared. It's about knowing who you are, knowing your values, being very grounded in those things, and really reminding yourself of those things ahead of time. I didn't want this to be prescriptive. I wanted people to, in the midst of a hard conversation or negotiations, I didn't want them to think, what did Mori say on page 68? I wanted people to sort of find their way, because they're so grounded in who they are and all the things that are important to them. So that's what this book was supposed to do, was really change the conversation and allow people to find the best in themselves as negotiators and great conversationalists, actually, and use connections as the sort of the jump off point for this dialogue.
I love it. So let me ask you a question. How do we find some of those connections, especially in the midst of negotiating, which isn't always like, it doesn't feel like the connection phase anymore?
Yeah, so it's so I'll talk about negotiations from these sort of what I think are like the four steps in any negotiation, right?
Yep.
There's sort of that preparation that I think everybody knows about, and they know that it's really, really important. I mean, it's the one thing that all academics stress. Everybody's been told, prepare, prepare, prepare. It's the most important thing. So that's sort of step one. Then the second step is what we call information exchange. And that's the point where you first meet somebody, right? And make that sort of person to person contact. And before this pandemic, it could have been you met somebody at a coffee shop, in their office, at your office. Now we do it virtually, but it's the step before the actual bargaining itself, right? So this is the point where your intention is simply to sort of get to know this person incredibly well, so that things like rapport are built and empathy is developed. You come in with intense curiosity about this person, and it's important for two reasons. And actually, it's important for many reasons, but two fundamental ones I think is that when you prepare for any negotiations, right, you can learn a lot. I mean, I always say you should be so prepared that when you first meet somebody, it's as though you've met them before, because you know so many things about them, right? The sports teams that they like, or where they went to college, or whatever. Google is kind of scary, Ryan, right? Like you can
Hmm.
find out just about anything about anybody these days. So there's no excuses around that. But when you finally meet somebody, I would say it's like going from a black and white movie to one in color, right? You learn about their mannerisms. You can learn about the things that make them unique, right? Things that you couldn't find online about them. And this is that harnessing this connection, right? This opportunity to lay eyes on them, to develop something deeper than just a transactional approach. The second thing is that I always think about it as the extension of preparation, because what you miss when you're just looking somebody up can be fundamentally sort of crucial to this conversation, right?
Hmm.
So now, by being really curious and being, and in all your humility, right? A lot of us think, oh, I know everything, I've prepared so much. I would ask that people go into this both prepared from a perspective of knowing what they want, but also malleable and flexible, because through this opportunity to meet this person, you may realize that you may have wanted too little. Like there's a great opportunity that you didn't even think about because you hadn't talked to this person yet. So
Hmm.
there's that, right? And then after that is when somebody makes an opening offer, and hence the negotiation begins.
Hmm.
I think the second step, this information exchange, can take multiple meetings before you even whisper an opening offer. And the longer that phase is, the more intense sort of intentional these connections are. So, answer to your question, but I think it's just that important. That's the step that is really everything. And I think people rush because we're a very efficient culture. But if you do business overseas, like in China and Japan, because they're so relationship oriented, that step actually could take weeks.
Hmm.
And then people decide, do we even want to do business with this person? So it's really that important.
I think what's cool is the way that you just framed it is that what I would have called building rapport and like that piece of like the meeting and info gathering, like the negotiation actually starts prior to that, right? So negotiations already started. It's not just the bargaining piece, because I think that's an assumption that people make, that negotiating is only the piece where you're bargaining
Right,
that starts at
right,
the initial offer. And
right.
realistically, like the negotiation already started happening well before then.
Truthfully, I mean, that's a really amazing point that you just brought up, and not too many people bring that up, Brian. So part of the reason why I love what you just said is that we begin negotiating when we start preparing for this conversation because we're negotiating with ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Setting your goals is a negotiation, right? Do I ask for this or do I ask for this? What's the upside if I do this? What's the downside if I do this? Like pros and cons lists. Or anytime you're making a decision, you're going through that whole phase of negotiations. It's just with yourself, or maybe your team, or maybe your spouse. And then you go into this other piece. So you're right. There's almost like negotiations on top of negotiations on top of negotiations. But that transactional piece, which people associate with the thing when you say what is a negotiations, they go right to that transaction piece,
Mm-hmm.
right? Preparation, transaction, right? Preparation, and then how much, right? And so what you're missing is all this like rich data with which you can make much better decisions, actually.
I have a great question now that like I want to ask from my own like desires just from having been through some of these. So let me just steal everybody's opportunity to ask questions. By the way, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat real quick because I do want to be cognizant of Maury's time because I know she has another call to be on after this. So my next question then would be, what do you do with somebody in that information stage, which is difficult to get information out of, right? They're not really just open to the idea of talking. They're kind of tight-lipped and afraid to give out too much.
So I think a lot of people who sort of have this bad experience with negotiations and they consider it to be something that's combative or you have to be really aggressive and contentious, who wants to be open in those types of conversations, right? They come in with this like force field, right? This very sort of protective mannerism. They're not open. They don't want to be taken advantage of. Some people say if I'm too open, I'll give away too much information. So they're sort of afraid of their own shadow.
Mhm.
And you have to know that a lot of people actually approach negotiations that way. So your primary responsibility is to go into that information exchange, and that's why that piece is so important. That you're signaling, look, I know we'll get to that transaction later. Right now, not important. What I really want to know is who you are. How do you do business? What are your values? What are your goals? What are your plans? And, some of the things that I know about you all in terms of buying businesses and all the rest of it, you call this sort of knowing your audience. But this is about really understanding, and empathy is very important, right? So it's that curiosity on steroids, right? Really understanding somebody so that you know what their motivations are in going into this conversation, right? Why are they even here? And that's their story. That could be their life story. That could be their journey. That could be the journey ahead that they're planning for. So when you signal to somebody that I'm not here to sell,
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to know. I'm here to understand. I'm here to build a connection. And you know what? In some ways, I don't really even care about that transaction later because there's something bigger here, right? And first of all, you have to do it authentically because if you don't, you'll come off as a used car salesman, right? People are like, oh, the first 20 questions you ask somebody when you meet them, that's the book you bought. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about truly paying attention to somebody so that what you're asking them is very relevant to them. And it's like magic, Ryan. Like people, that force field comes down, the guards drop, and they become. It's almost like disarming to them
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, wait a minute, this person really is interested in me, And the more authentic you are, the more open you are in hearing their story, the it feels really good. People love that sense of being seen, and I would say probably now more than ever, right? Because there is a sense of intimacy here. People think like, oh, we can't do this in a way that's meaningful anymore. And I would argue, I've been teaching online since March, and I would tell you that in some ways this feels even more intimate
Mm-hmm.
if you can be really focused, like no distractions, and really show people that this is all that I really care about. Who are
Yeah.
you? What are you all about?
I love that. And I think it's kind of cool when people are meeting like from in their house. Like there's a different intimacy that just comes into play just from that
Absolutely.
standpoint, as opposed to in a coffee shop or in their office or your office or whatever. There's like a level sort of comfort and playing field.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're letting you into their space. And I think we should be both appreciative of that and also understand that if done right, if done authentically, that this could lend a bigger sort of openness and sort of relationship oriented conversation than just a transactional one.
Love it. So let me ask, how does somebody win or lose at negotiation? Like where are some of like the pitfalls to avoid, and like what are some things that will help people to do it better right out of the gates?
Yeah, so it's funny because my students are almost never allowed to use the word win in my class the whole semester. Like I sort of from day one, I'm like, let me just tell you why this is not about winning or losing.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not just that whole like win-win conversation that people talk about, right? Which is really in essence, you get what you want, they get what they want, not everything, right? Because you're compromising. But the reason why I don't use the word win as much is because, namely, because I think that, a big part of preparation that people just don't think about is sort of this notion of, again, thinking about who you are, right? What are your values? What are the things that are so important to you that if you compromised, that you wouldn't be whole, that you would really regret the decisions that you made or the way you want to treat somebody, right? And it's funny because you think, oh, that's so natural to me. Why do I even have to think about it? We forget those things when we're in these conversations, particularly if they become a little difficult or contentious, right? So I've had many people who've come to me after negotiations that have said, Professor Taheripour, this is really strange because I can look because they'll put up their scores even on the board. I'll sort of review these exercises and we'll see what one person got versus another. And in real life, people talk about this in business deals that they've done. And they said, by any measure, this was a great outcome, right? I mean, the numbers I got, I've never even seen before. This was fantastic. I feel like hell, right? I feel like hell. And I just don't even understand why I'm feeling this way. And so as we start talking and sort of I'm asking questions or sort of peeling away this onion, what we soon realize is that, yeah, they got a great deal, but they behaved in a way that they weren't proud of, for example, right? They
Mm-hmm.
talked to this person in a way that sometimes I hear, I didn't even recognize who that was. The words were coming out of my mouth. I didn't even know why I was doing this, right? Or worse yet, they weren't prepared enough. So when somebody asked them a question, they lied. And so they're like, now that the words are out there, I can't take them back, right? So I said something, what if they find out? So now I'm stressed about that. Or I gave up, and this happens a lot, particularly in like family owned businesses or
Mm-hmm.
when two friends go into business together, that if one of you is more accommodating and a people pleaser, that you've given up so much in these throughout these conversations that now you're upset. Now you're thinking I was taken advantage of. Well, no, you didn't really remind yourself of the very things that were so important to you that maybe you shouldn't have compromised on. So that's why I think the word winning is so loaded because
Mm-hmm.
I think any individual can look at it very differently. And if you're sort of relationship oriented, then winning means this was a deal that you did that maybe wasn't the very best that could have gotten, but now you have such a great rapport with this person that you're going to do business with them in perpetuity. So
Mm-hmm.
that's winning for you. Somebody else says, I'll never see this person again. I got a great number. That's winning for you, right? So you have to really determine what your interests are and then think about this notion of winning or losing, which, again, it's loaded. And I just feel like there's so much more to it than sort of the simple notion of a W and an L. It's hardly a sports, you know. So it's there's so much more to it than that.
So sticking to your core beliefs, right? And then authenticity, like making sure that you're committed to
Absolutely.
bringing yourself, like you said. I love
Absolutely.
it. All
Think
right.
about
Well,
things that are important to you. That's what matters.
I'm going to let you wrap it up here. So is there one last thing that you would like to leave off and share with these guys going off into their negotiations and their business buying?
Yeah, I think that I'm sure that you all, there's really nothing I can tell you about, again, how to prepare for these conversations or sort of what kinds of interests you should consider in terms of setting your goals and all the rest of it. Ask for more, you'll get more. It's sort of like positive psychology research. But what I will tell you is that, again, just putting it in this sort of this notion of a pandemic and the times that we're living in, we all regret the fact that we can't meet with people in person, right? There is something to that connection in person that really matters to us. But this could be our new normal, and this is how you're going to do business. So, the whole famous Maya Angelou quote is that people may not remember what you said, they may not remember what you did, but they will absolutely remember how you made them feel. And I think if this is all we have, then do the very best you can to engage with these people in a really rich dialogue that can better inform you about your buying decisions anyway, and create an opportunity that again is not a one-off type of a thing. Like I think that every single business deal can be one that has future potential. So be kind, be respectful, be open, be empathetic, be curious, be humble. And I think that you'll never lose because I think humanity responds better to those things.
Thank you so much, Maury, for
You're
hopping on the
welcome.
call with us tonight. I appreciate you. I
Thank
know that
you.
you've got some crazy stuff going on as well, and moving around. Where can these guys find your book if they want more of your stuff right away? And then also, hopefully, we can get you back on because it'd be so cool to have you come in and talk on one of the nights where we have somebody in the middle of a negotiation,
Right.
and sort of give them maybe some pointers on how they could do a better job of diving in and asking some of those questions and tying it to their core beliefs and whatever. So
Sure, absolutely. Anywhere you can buy books. So Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. You can actually go to Penguin Random House where my book was published. I'm all over social media, so under my name and Instagram and Twitter. So you can even get links to where you can buy my books, and you can even go to bringyourself.com or my own website. So there's links to all the places you can buy books on those things. So I
everywhere.
appreciate you.
I don't know if you
Thank
can
you for
see the
this.
chat over here, Maury, but I just wanted to read a couple things to you. So, Mary said, "This is so refreshing. I always felt that I had to learn to be tough and hard. It seems that being open, curious, and caring, along with being smart, is more advantageous. Thanks for that." And then Sue said, "Thank you, Maury. I love her approach and the human spirit she honors." So,
Thank you
uh,
so much, people. I'm wishing you the very, very best of luck.